Okay, we have quorum, so I call this meeting to order at 3:05 p.m. on November 29, 2023. Attendance is taken by means of sign-in sheet. Mr. Secretary, do we have a quorum? Yes, great. There are several alternates today, and there are Rosalind Hudson for Stanislao Barrera, Melissa Thompson for Janine Grodesky, Lauren Griffin for Jeffrey Rowland, Youngwon Lee for Marcia Newcomer, K. Stephen Prince for John Bardis, and Fred Agazada for Gerald Baumgartner. Are there any other alternates who are here that I haven't called? Okay, wonderful. We have several guests today at our meeting. President Tate will address the faculty shortly. Then we have later in the program, we will have Niki Norton from HR addressing our new parental leave policy. Then we also will have Jackie Bach from Academic Affairs and Craig Woolley, who will be joined by Param Singh to talk about the ITS survey that will be forthcoming soon. The minutes were circulated to you via email. Is there a motion to accept the minutes from November 2nd meeting? Okay, second. Yeah. Are there any corrections? To the minutes? No. Okay. All those in favor to accept the minutes from November 2nd, please say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, one abstention. Okay, so the minutes from November 2nd pass. Dear Senators, I hope you had a restful Thanksgiving weekend. Since our last meeting, there are several items that I think would be of interest to you. This is a slightly shortened list from the one that was sent to you in writing yesterday. So if you would like to get the full report, please refer to that email. And obviously my reports are always posted on our website. The first item is parental leave. I sent a broadcast email on November 14th communicating good news about parental leave for faculty and staff. As you may recall, on November 9th, Governor Edwards signed Executive Order JBE 2023-18, extended parental leave policies recently adopted into the state civil service rules to non-classified employees in executive branch agencies. As pointed out in an article in the Illuminator, due to provisions in state law, these changes do not apply to non-classified employees at LSU. However, I'm pleased to let you know that I was informed by LSU HRM that it is their intention to mirror Governor Edwards' executive order, and they will be revising PS 12 and PM 20 to adopt parental leave for birth, adoptive, and foster parents employed at LSU to go into effect on January 1st, 2024. Niki Norton, as I noted earlier, Assistant Vice President of HRM, will be speaking later to provide additional information on this topic. I have also been in communication with Academic Affairs and Staff Senate leadership to develop plans to allow us to maintain continuity of instruction and LSU operations during employee absences, such as those due to FMLA leave. We will be convening a working group incorporating various campus stakeholders to work through questions relating to this issue and develop policies necessary to address them. Recent events on campus and elsewhere. For the last couple of months, there have been a handful of pranks and disruptions reported on our campus and issues of concern on other campuses across the state. I have been in touch with Brandon Common, Vice President of Student Affairs, and Michael Antoine, Associate Vice President for Campus Safety, Emergency Preparedness, and Emergency Response regarding these events. Mr. Antoine will be visiting us in January to discuss mitigating measures that are taken on campus and address any of your concerns and questions. faculty hiring portal. Due to recent revisions to Louisiana Statute 1828.3 contained in Act number 106 from the 2023 regular legislative session, additional documentations were needed to process job and graduate school applications from individuals who are citizens of adversary countries. In response to faculty concern about language used to solicit this additional information from applicants, we were able to work with ORED and HR to change how the request was presented to make it more welcoming for applicants. I appreciate the collaborative effort of all parties involved as we continue to attract applicants from diverse pool of candidates, nationally and internationally, and stay in compliance with both state and federal laws. Tiger Trails Garden District bus route. As many of you know, the Garden District route was scheduled to end this semester. However, thanks to a tremendous outcry from the LSU community, I'm happy to report that this service will continue through the end of the spring semester. I'm grateful to Kaylee Altz, Interim Director of Parking and Transportation Services, for reconsidering the original decision. I hope that we can continue discussions in keeping this route operational beyond the spring semester. If you'd like to communicate any further concerns about this, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Faculty Appeals Board. We have been working with the Office of Academic Affairs to identify all appeals processes contained in LSU policy statements and permanent memoranda to better understand when and how the Faculty Appeals Board will be called upon. As soon as we have that list, we will be asking the policy committee to take a comprehensive look at these scenarios and identify possible improvement which could be made to policies, charges, or operating procedures of the appeals board. I am happy to report that the Faculty Council meeting date has been set to April 22nd, 2024 at 3 o'clock at the Royal Cotillion Ballroom in Student Union. Please mark your calendars. Further information will be coming in coming months about registration. And the executive committee has appointed a committee that will work with us to coordinate the planning and to suggest topics to the president's office. So please be in touch with me directly and as we approach the date. There will also be town hall with the provost. In light of the success of last year's event, Provost Haggerty has offered to conduct another town hall with LSU. With LSU faculty and staff to address matters of interest on campus, including the budget. The event is scheduled for Fridays, February 2nd from 2 to 3 p.m. It will probably be at the School of Journalism. Further information and details will be communicated within the next week, and there will be an opportunity to submit questions to the provost, both in advance and from the floor during the meeting. Finally, extreme temperatures across campus continue to be a problem. Please email me if your unit or your building is experiencing such problems. I've been in touch with facility services and would like to identify the spaces that are too uncomfortable to inhabit. Please join us for a reception shortly after the meeting today to celebrate the end of the semester. And if I don't see you after that, I hope you have a wonderful holiday break. Are there any questions about my report? Yes. Right. Yes, absolutely. We're working on this. I will keep my cards close to my chest. We're trying to make this happen as more than anyone. I really want to make this happen. So I'm actually working with General Counsel's office to see if we can make this work better. So yes, please, maybe we can speak afterwards, after the meeting. Yeah, but thank you. Yes.
Appeals Board
Oh, there's a mic.
questions? Oh, thank you. On the section 5, what and you said, and you were very clear, but you said we are looking to clarify cases that might go to the Appeals Board, which I guess I was just nominated to serve on. And you said we, and we're going to submit it to policy. Who's we?
Oh, the executive committee.
Okay, so the exec committees. So great.
Yeah, we are working right now with academic affairs to identify any situations where appeals board would be called upon. And then based on those situations, we're going to work with policy committee, we as an executive committee.
Cool. Great.
And then there will be charged to write a very specific, to come up with charges and very specifically, just like the way adjudication committee has very clear
Thank you.
Procedures, operational procedures. So we're gonna mirror that in for the appeals board.
Groovy. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, if there are no other further questions, it is my pleasure to welcome President Tate to address the faculty. President Tate.
Need to clip it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I think, can you hear me okay? That's good. Great. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. And that's, I want to thank you for all that you do. It's been a tremendous pleasure to work with the leadership team of the Faculty Senate this past year. Obviously, I think we work well together, and I'd like to continue in that trend. It's just been good to have faculty partners to have conversations with about very important issues. And many things have happened where it's just been very special to be able to just articulate what's really going on. Some things that don't appear in the newspaper, as they say, and that we have to manage. And so I appreciate it. I want to talk to you just about a few things that have happened and then add, where we are right now. One of the things that you'll often hear about with respect to higher education is the demographic cliff. That number related to birth rates and what is happening to higher education across the country. Many of you have probably kept up with things at West Virginia, for example, where there are some concerns about their enrollment, and enrollment decline is impacting their overall financial viability. Similarly, Arizona, University of Arizona, where you saw sort of the confluence of a problem, specifically one related to enrollment and their ability to secure very talented students and the cost of doing that, combined with one-time costs associated with, I guess, a transfer of COVID dollars to athletics, puts a big pinch on the budget and puts them in a situation that, you find yourself on the New York Times. I mean, this is what's happening around the country. And if you run the numbers around what institutions are at risk from a financial perspective, it becomes quite daunting when you think about the fact that the way we fund higher education in Louisiana, it's 70% of it comes from tuition and other dollars, and 30% really legislatively. And so the fact of the matter is the budgets depend on us to be able to manage enrollment extremely well in a time where there's a decreasing number of students who might be participating in higher education. That said, I think it's always important to start about what happened last year and where we are today. Most of you know we had a record freshman class last year in terms of the quality factors. I won't repeat them overall, but the ACT scores and the average GPAs were up, and our honors college demand was extremely high, and those students who matriculated here, again, broke records in terms of their academic quality. To date, I asked my colleague in enrollment management to provide me some information so you might have a sense of where we are today. Our applications are up from last year, 14.5%. We have over 24,000 applications right now. That is extremely important number. We have 48% higher number of students admitted from the applications that we received to date. It's very strong, a group that's been admitted, about a 4.22 GPA and a 29.8 on the ACT. Now, the key is, can you get them? So it's one thing to apply. It's another thing to determine what happens when you get in, rubber meets the road in the second semester. But these numbers are very important for us in terms of our financial viability, but they're also important because they speak to you. I mean, when you have really good students applying to a place, it's because you have great faculty. And I think it's transparent that people are seeing that. And that was also reflected in the survey data that we did around the state, where over 90% of the respondents thought that LSU was doing well, and they also had a very favorable impression of our faculty. That's foundational to enrollment management. There has to be a perception in the public that the faculty is excellent in doing good things. And so I just really want to commend you for that, and really appreciative. It also speaks to the hard work of our enrollment management team, who've been going out and really selling what you have. And I know talking about what you have really well. And it's just special because other people who I talk to, my colleagues, are not in the same position. This is very good. It's also important to retain, because the most expensive education you have is the one you don't finish. And we want to make sure our students are finishing, and continuing is really a function of what happens in your classroom. And so some data about that, with respect to our first year students, right now, of the first year students, 95.7% of them have registered for the second semester. Now, they did that before they've got their final grades, of course, but it speaks to their belief that they are trending right and they've had a very good experience. That's an increase over last year of 91%. And so more of the students are feeling confident about staying. That speaks to not only what you're doing, but also the financial situations that they have, the resources they need to continue. Very strong. With respect to Pell eligible students, which is a number we've often targeted to make sure we're providing access and opportunity for others, it has increased to 94% of Pell eligible first year students have registered for next semester. That's extremely strong compared to 87% or 89% last year. So it's increasing, it's improving. That speaks to the support services. I don't know if Dr. Cassidy is on the docket to talk about accreditation today, but one of the big accreditation issues, and you saw earlier, is these numbers really speak to the quality factors they look for in accreditation. And I'm excited by them. Continuing students, the number has increased to 93% of continuing students. That's second and third and fourth year students are registered for next semester compared to last year's number of 90%. So we work in 0.5% in this world. Anytime you go up 0.5%, you're doing well. When you start talking 2 and 3%, that's really a significant effect in terms of interventions that are happening in this world. So I want to thank you for that and what you're doing in the classrooms, because that makes a big difference in terms of getting students and keeping students. We also find ourselves, and I'll be curious about the data, we did improve the stipends for PhD students and some set of master's students. They are as competitive as you can get in the SEC. We want them to stay competitive. I will say to you that when we think about what we want to ask for in the future from donors and or the legislature, that graduate student metric around stipends is always going to be front and center. We've got to continue to stay competitive with that. And so we will continue to work on that. And that's a promise for me on that. And I hope the implementation process related to those students is going well in your respective departments. We want to make sure that we use the money well and we keep great grad students. The combination of great undergraduates and graduate students is what a fine university should be about. We are emphasizing student success. We've had an increase in retention over the past year. We have increased retention from 87% to 87% from a much lower number. And I just want to say, because we're doing it over time, it's just special. It doesn't really happen without you. You know, 1 year retention is a snapshot, but when over time, when we start to see the cumulative effects, it's really important. Last year, we touted a lot about the record-breaking state support we received. That was great, $232 million across the LSU system. Now, where are we going forward? Well, there's something called tax policy. And tax policy is why we had so much money actually to be appropriated over the last few years. The tax policy was in our favor. That tax policy is rolling off after this year. And so a big question for the future of our appropriations is a function of what happens to tax policy. It doesn't specifically say it's higher education policy, but if your antennas are up and paying attention to what we're going to be able to pull off in terms of working with the legislature and the governor-elect, a lot of it will depend on tax policy and whether or not the taxes roll off or stay on. That's a fact. The record-breaking numbers were a function of tax policy and great GR and really people working hard to make clear what we were trying to get accomplished here. From a philanthropy point of view, last year was our second best year in LSU history. The year before that was our best year. We're going to continue on the philanthropy side to bring in resources. Obviously, a key target is the library. And when we think about what happened on the government relations side, we did get money for the design of a library, but the way it works is every building you get, if you think about it, somewhere between one half and 1/3 of it, you have to raise philanthropic. So the science building, for those of you who are going to be there, we had to raise about half of the money for that science building to happen. So a big part of the last 2 years of philanthropy were associated with that science building. The next few years are going to be associated with the library because that library, and the provost might remind me, is it like 185 million on paper right now? 155, which means it's going to be 180. We're selling 155, but in cost of materials, supply chain, overtime, inflation, you end up with a bigger number than you actually start with. So we're going to have to raise half of that and then really fight during this time where tax policy is in our favor to get more money put in P1, which is where we can actually spend it in real time. So there are other buildings that may go up on the docket. One of the things that I just say to this group, there are a lot of buildings we have that, well, they need tender loving care. Some of them we can actually get resources for. As I said to this body in the past, I don't think a Southern legislative body has given money for a non-STEM building for some time. If we were thinking about how we were going to do it, the library requires us to move certain buildings, like the current electrical engineering building is plopped right where the library would be. So you would imagine somehow we have to figure out how to get a building or space for electrical engineering just to get a library. So the domino effects associated with the library are how we back in to ask for other things in the master plan. That's part of how this works. So remember, if you hear about something happening with respect to physical infrastructure, the driver is going to be the library, and you're backing into moving different buildings and potentially getting newer buildings because you've got to get the library up. It's a primary consideration. So it's not that we don't love and want to change the building you might be in right now. It's just the library is front and center. Research, we broke another system record on research. I commend you for those of you who contributed to that in any form or fashion. It's quite special to have over $428 million in research expenditures in 1 year. I think we could do better if we had better infrastructure and we can maintain our faculty by, very competitive salaries and the like. And so that's part of our plan. Obviously, the graduate student investment was part of that as well. And we're hopeful that we can knit together the resources across the system to bring even more interdependence across our system to enhance our research infrastructure. So Dr. Twilley's been asked to do some of that work, and we're really excited about that part of what we might be able to do as a collective at LSU. Strategic planning, the system strategic plan, which we are obviously a part of, we were going to release it this month. We're probably going to release it in the February board meeting. It's pretty much done, and we're excited about that. What will follow from that are the different campus plans that will really build off the synergy from the system plan. So you should see more action and activity around the system-wide planning than the strategic plan for the Baton Rouge campus in the next semester. What you all probably want to know is what's it like to go through a gubernatorial transition and what particular impact we might expect in higher education. I sort of alluded to tax policy being higher ed policy. Thus far, we've had members of the LSU community who've been assigned to various transition teams for the governor-elect. Some of the things that I've gleaned in the conversations with some of those folks, because they've asked us, one, we asked directly about tenure and, what are we dealing with on the tenure front? Since last year we had a tenure bill that was to review things. Are we expecting any charge around tenure? The feedback I received back was that tenure was not a issue that is really high on the mantle for discussion for the governor-elect. However, I did come to understand that there was a perception or concern that a tenured faculty member who broke a law or might have engaged in some kind of power-based violence as described by the state, that there aren't processes in place to adjudicate such a person and have them potentially removed. We did help our colleagues understand we do have those processes in place in the governance function. It would not surprise me if there was a more open discussion about this in the first few months of this particular governor's tenure. I can't speak to that directly. It's just a gut feeling. We do, though, have our own processes in place, and I think the various systems will be called upon to explain how we operate and to make clear that these things exist. I don't know what will happen after that. I can't predict that, but I'm just giving you a foreshadowing. But the issue around tenure, like you see in some of the states, I don't think that is going to be an issue. At least that's not the impression I've received. I can say a general perception. I actually wrote down a statement. I don't know if I can get to it. It's a statement that I wrote this morning. And it comes from a conversation around our accreditation efforts. We at LSU use evidence-based practice and policies, including the disaggregation of demographic data to ensure access, opportunity, and student success. Consistent with our accreditation standards, we use evidence to determine how financial resources, programs, and practices are implemented to ensure appropriate accommodations and equal opportunity to succeed in our department, school, et cetera, are realized. Well, why do I write that? We live in a world where these kinds of statements are highly scrutinized. We tend to use a DEI language. That's what's been happening probably since the Michael Brown incident in 2014, where the rhetorical positions around diversity, equity, and inclusion began to unfold after his death and also George Floyd. And so what I want to be clear about with anybody who might question what we do at LSU is we adhere to certain principles around equal opportunity that are legally defensible. And we're going to use language that's consistent with anything that's legally defensible. And we're willing to go to the mat for that. And so what I've said to my colleagues is make sure everything you say is legally defensible, and you be committed to principles and not language. Understand what I mean? Some people use the language as shorthand and they never articulate what they actually mean. As faculty members, we know that's not good. But if we say what we mean, and I'm willing to stand by this until I'm no longer in the academy, until they say you have to leave. So if we are willing to make these kinds of statements and say this is what we believe and this is what we're willing to fight for, I think we'll be fine. But if we get into nebulous language that is unclear and allows you to be criticized, you probably will be. I mean, that's just how it's going to be. That's my perception of the circumstances that we're going to find ourselves in. And shorthand is not going to work. We have to articulate exactly what we mean, what we're doing, and how we want to do it. I wrote this statement after Dr. Cassidy's presentation on accreditation because I believe our accreditation standards require us to operate in this way for us to be an accredited higher education institution. And I believe that is legally defensible anywhere in this country. So I say that and offer that to you in a public forum. Sure, I'll take questions when I'm done. Oh, yeah, it's not the one that the lawyers approved. It's just the bill Tate. I'm willing to fight for this. We use evidence-based practices and policies, including the disaggregation of demographic data to ensure access, opportunity, and student success. Consistent with our accreditation standards, we use evidence to determine how financial resources, programs, and practices are implemented to ensure appropriate accommodations and equal opportunity to succeed in our, just call it unit, are realized. I'm willing to fight for that. It's legally defensible. There you have it. Tenure, that whole DEI world, tax policy, to me, those are going to be the big three that we're going to probably have to manage. I believe on the tax policy, it's maybe a tad bit over our pay grade, but we are lobbying because mandated costs are not actually associated with higher ed. So we need good tax policy for us to flourish. We want to make sure this place is a great place for people to study and matriculate. And if we have our principles articulated very well to the communities who are responding to what we do, I think we'll be in good stead. And finally, I think we have to really fight for tenure and make sure that we don't have any problems there. I would also like to commend the Faculty Senate on our discussions related to free speech. It would be very, very helpful if you're successful in your petition to make sure that people understand that this is a place where free speech is just, that's what we do. And I think that comes with some political price. Some might wonder how far I'm willing to go to fight for free speech. I am willing to go to the very end of my professional career to fight for free speech. I will not defend things that I think are inconsistent with adult conversation, but I will defend any principled research, anytime, any place, anywhere for the rest of my life. And I think it's extremely important also to know that even if you say something that I might think is not very cool, I still will defend your right to say it. I just won't get out there and say that was cool. You know, my mother taught me better. So my bottom line is we've got to make sure we're clear about free speech at LSU, not just because we're changing administrations, because we have a long history of people critiquing us about whether this is a place where free speech can manifest. I also want to say that we also need to have another conversation about statements. You know, many universities released statements about various geopolitical activities over the last month and a half. I received many, many, many requests from non-LSU people and LSU people to release statements. I would like to say, as a native of Chicago, I adhere to the University of Chicago principles about statements from the president. I believe you and the students should be free to make any statement that you want to about any matter, and that we should defend it. You're right to do that. But I don't believe that the president should be making statements that squashes your ability to have free speech and engage. Now, it's a principled position I personally have taken. Some have not appreciated it, others have. I've appreciated it as I've watched some of my colleagues write one statement, then a second statement, and then a third statement, and then a fourth statement, because it has now become really folly. And I don't believe that you should be writing statements every time a philanthropy or benefactor might say, I'm going to withdraw money because you didn't do X or Y. We're not supposed to be running universities like that. You're supposed to be saying what you think should happen based upon the evidence and the history and your knowledge of situations. And my job is to defend your ability to do that. That's where I am. Now, that's not instantiated in LSU code in any way. So I believe collaboratively, we need to think through what our principle on statements ought to be as a collective. It shouldn't just be me saying it. I came here with that as a preordained way of thinking about it. So I already knew what would happen when things happen because I knew what I wanted to do principally. But it's not just up to me to do that. I think it's important that we have conversations with each other about how we think about statements coming from the institution. So I welcome that conversation about that because I think it also speaks to the free speech conversations we need to have. And finally, I just want to end on something that I know Anessa talked about on our survey. When I look at the national data related to higher education and the trends associated with the perception of higher ed growing decidedly negative across political groups, and then we do our own state survey, it shows it's very positive. Now, I'm not a polling expert, but I'm just going to take the snapshot of what folks thought about us. I just want to thank you because that means people have come here, they've had great experiences, and they've left and they told other people, even people who may not even be in higher education. They actually know about your discoveries. They know the implications of them. This is what we really should be doing at a flagship. And I just want to thank you for that. We did that survey for a reason. You know, you never ask a question without having a purpose. We did that because we wanted to make clear to anyone who might have a doubt about who you are and why you're important, that it would be taken off the table. We always release these economic development reports. You know, we generate $6.1 billion of economic development. And some people read that and they find it interesting. But I wanted to know what the average person in Louisiana thought about you. And the fact that they think so well of you, I think it's something we can use and leverage going forward. So thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions at all about any matter, whether it's the subject we discussed or something else that's burning in your head.
Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you, President Tate. Thank you for being here and taking the time to talk to us all today. I have a couple of questions, but I think two of them might be, let's say, not on the adult agenda, so I'll save those. But one is, you spoke about language that is legally defensible, and I appreciate your statement about DEI very, very much. But I'm wondering if there might not be an approach that is not focused on language that is legally defensible, but on training LSU employees, faculty, staff, and students to have better mindsets about diversity, inclusion, and equality, so that we're not so concerned about how people speak about it, but what they think about it and how they think about it.
I have never seen any training that actually had any efficacy related to that. And mandatory training generally has the exact opposite of impact of the intended outcome, no matter what it is, whether it's safety or whatever. I just don't know if there's an empirical basis for what you're saying. So if we're a research university, we ought to be doing evidence-based practice. So if you can find me a effective training that has substantial research behind it that suggests that it's implemented and actually changes mindset, please let me know about it. I've never seen it. I haven't seen it in safety. I haven't seen it in, DEI. I haven't seen it in anything. And in fact, the National Research Council put out several papers, reports that talked about how it's very difficult to create training that changes mindset. I just think it's a tough deal.
perhaps an LSU sponsored initiative to create such a training. I mean, I know that the Office of Title IX has a whole focus group working now on educating the LSU campus community about what constitutes power-based violence on campus and how we can address it more practically and more, I don't know, informatively and productively. So maybe we could do the same thing with the LSU approach to things like diversity of class, of ability, of race, of gender, etc.
Well, that kind of work is typically done by social psychologists. And I know some very good ones at many universities who do that kind of work to ascertain whether a certain kind of training, for example, will work with police or firemen and other. And I think it's a research endeavor. Like any other research endeavor, the university wouldn't necessarily take that on, but I would certainly encourage any faculty members who are interested in applying the skills and tenets of their discipline to do that kind of research. There is a literature around training and efficacy associated with it, but it is most definitely a research project. It is not something you could say you're implementing unless you were trying to do an evaluation as part of a big research project. And I haven't had anybody propose that to me or anybody who has an intervention per se. And I'm trying to be really nice about some of the things I've seen in areas of higher ed that are using certain tenets that I've privately said to some of my colleagues, you don't have any empirical basis for what you're doing. I mean, it looks good, it might make you feel good personally, but there's no efficacy associated with your intervention. And so this is why you get into a pickle in public policy, because people will say, and you're implementing things that actually have no evidentiary base to them. And because training is often it's just a difficult deal, you find yourself in a bad spot trying to defend something that really there's no evidence to help you defend it. And that particular training was mandated. Doesn't mean it's going to be effective. I'm not politically correct. We have to do it. It's a state mandate. And so we need to check the efficacy of it, and then pivot. But I think that's a big part of what's going to have to happen with that training.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Baldridge. I'm in the math department. Thank you as well. And I just wanted to say that I'm really impressed with our students this year. They're just to let you know, they're just amazing. They're many different backgrounds in there. When we have discussions, they're very polite and respectful and almost don't feel like we need any type of extra training, at least with the students. So maybe they're just coming from good backgrounds and that's what we're seeing. But I thought you would like to know that.
Yeah, I explained to some of my colleagues who on the letter writing campaign deal that we monitored very carefully after October 7th what was happening on our campus and in the state. And we found almost no activity that would be viewed as hostile to any group. It was quite stunning and juxtaposed to where I was in New York raising money for LSU, and it was a very different environment than the environment we were having here and the environment we were documenting on social media. And so I thought our students and faculty and staff acted in honorable fashion. We did have protests on campus. As far as I got from the people there, that it was all done in a way that you would expect in a civil society. And they adjourned, and the next day I was with the international students and they were all at a picnic together. I mean, it's just a different deal, and I'm thankful for it. I don't take it for granted. But thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hello, I'm Dr. Michelle Todd. I'm from the School of Leadership and Human Resource Development. So we're the people who studies this, reads the literature on this, makes the training, looks at the efficacy. I have so many things to say. I don't even know where to start.
Say it. Don't hold back.
Oh my goodness. But anyway, my particular research isn't on diversity, but I've done a lot of research on ethical decision-making training. I'm sure many of us conduct research and have had to take the mandatory city training, which also kind of feels similar to mandatory DEI trainings that can just feel like a pain and you're not learning anything. And the research does support that, like you said, but there is literature supporting that more thorough DEI training programs can be quite effective. The problem is that they are expensive because you need to have like in-person training sessions, trained trainers, all of these things. And obviously money, budget, all of these things are important and difficult for the university to figure out. But if anybody wants to conduct any research on diversity training, if you have thoughts and ideas, I'm happy to talk to you. And that is kind of the bread and butter of my program. So feel free to email me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brett Boutwell, College of Music and Dramatic Arts. This is about the early part of your talk concerning the demographic cliff. It seems that in most universities today, including LSU's, enrollment management teams play an increasingly important role in shaping the financial and the reputational futures of institutions. But at least from a faculty member's perspective, their operations can seem very opaque to me. It's unclear to me who has input, who offers them input, and other than your office, to whom they report. Can you speak a little bit about who sets the mission of the enrollment? You set their mission, and in terms of the metrics for evaluating their outcomes.
Yeah, I told them to get the smartest kids they can get, measured by a GPA. And for those students who are on tops, they obviously have to take standardized tests. So then, as measured by standardized tests, and give me as many of them as you possibly can until we don't have any money left in terms of scholarship in them. That it's like not very complicated. So you want very smart kids who can take advantage of being at a Research One university, and you want them from every geospatial parish that exists. The more parishes represented, the better, because we are LSU and we're Louisiana based. So give me the smartest kids in Louisiana you can. And then I want anybody else who wants to go to school in Louisiana, who is talented in some area, maybe music, maybe engineering, maybe physics, maybe history, just bright as they can be, and bring them here. And if we have to pay for it because they are Pell eligible, let's get the money. And if we have to pay for it because we're in a competition because they're a high flyer, let's get the money and let's trend up as fast as we can. That's their charge.
And in terms of evaluating how well they do at their charge, is that also through your office, exclusively?
Yes. So they have metrics. Reason we report out like we're trending up or down is because we're tracking how well they do. We also have to have an associated budget for the scholarships for what they do. So for Pell eligible students, we've got to make sure we have the scholarship money. For the stamp scholars and the really high flyers who might be in honors college, you have to appropriately have the money. All of that is there. Now, why wouldn't you tell how much money you have publicly? Because we're in a competition with other universities. Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Florida, Texas A&M. So you don't disclose how much you have because you're trying to, work with a family one by one to get them to come here and not really go into big debt. That's the other big requirement I have. I don't want kids to come here from out of state, for example, who are going to go into debt. They should go to their state school. I've been clear with my colleagues about that, for example. It's not fair unless they just really have to be here. But mostly it's really a process of just methodically going through individual applications, because that's how we do ours here, and figuring out how we can get the money lined up with a need to get the person here. It really isn't complicated. There's no fancy algorithms beyond how much money do we have in the pool, and who's in the pool, and trying to match them up. And we don't, and I've told them, like, this last year, I said, I want more humanities students. And they were like, what? I said, yeah, I want more humanities students. And he's up. The number of students who wanted to be in humanities actually went up because they went out and tried to recruit more. You might ask, why do I want more humanities students? Because the why questions are big time driven by English majors, history majors.
No, I'm thrilled that you want more humanities students.
My STEM people might get upset. But you know,
Thank you.
we always get STEM folks. I mean, it's just, can you go out and get the great English major or whatever? That's special when you can do it. Yes.
I'm Melissa Thompson, College of Human Sciences and Education. So I want to switch gears just a little bit. I appreciate how you discussed the importance of the faculty and how you value the faculty. And you mentioned earlier the competitive faculty salaries. So I just want to ask you about this summer. There was a decision at the higher administration level to not include a monetary compensation with non-tenure promotion. So can you shed any light on why the administration decided for non-tenure track to not include monetary compensation with promotion?
I don't know about that one. Roy, you know anything about that? Not the world I live in.
Okay, thanks.
Can you hear me? Oh, well, here it comes. Yeah, we don't. Is it on? Yeah, it is now. Yeah, we don't have a policy on that, or we have a policy on increasing it for tenure track. We don't have it for non-tenure track, and we're looking at that. It is a gap. I completely agree. We encourage units to provide that, but it's not mandatory. So it's just basically a policy matter right now.
Thank you.
There's some questions. Is it about money? Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Mehdi Farasat from electrical engineering. A question about, you mentioned about the tax break. That's a great means for us to flourish, especially when it comes to recruiting and retaining good faculty. So if we don't get that, like, I always wondered, have we looked into finding other resources for that sort of part of the budget that is required for that and not rely on the state?
Well, we gotta rely on them for a small amount, but the thing that's important for them is that they provide you continuing dollars. And so, you know, we raise money for startups largely from philanthropy. That money doesn't often come from the state. That actually comes from us raising dollars so that we can give STEM folks a good startup package as best we can. The state salary, the state funding is really around costs that continue year over year. So when we're asking for merit raises, we're trying to get year over year salary increases for you all. That's a big part of what tax policy dictates what we are able to get, because if we've got good tax policy, we can get continuing increases for faculty salaries. We've had increases over the last few years with this administration, and we're just going to have to continue to fight for that going forward. If you don't get them, there's only one other way to get there, because you don't get a gift that pays into perpetuity or a 40-year work life or a 25-year work life. There's only one way to get there, and that's generally you have to cut and then reallocate so you can pay for it. And you've been through a lot of that here. So we've been trying not to put you through that anymore. I don't know where we're going to be on that, but that's kind of the only way. Tuition autonomy is another way. And so if we had tuition autonomy, for example, we could change the rate for tuition even in, let's say, engineering, and say we're going to charge more for an engineering degree. We would not want to do it in education because we want to encourage that. I'm just giving you hypothetical, but you'd want to encourage more teachers because their salaries are much lower than the starting salary of an engineer. And so hypothetically, many universities, that's actually, in reality they do, but hypothetically here, you could charge more for an engineering degree, or let's say a finance degree, and then use that delta to put into the salary. So we have been talking to the transition team about tuition autonomy as an important potential offset if we don't get the tax. So you're on point with that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience with all the questions.
I actually like this part much more than.
Good. I can sense that you do. So thank you for your time and especially for your passion in our autonomy, our voices, the protection of free speech and all of that. I think it's marvelous. Lily Allen, social work. What's perplexing to me, or what's difficult, is our world is broken right now. The world is really broken right now. And I can appreciate that as the highest leader, you have to walk a very difficult path because you don't want to, you can't, what's the word I'm looking for? Isolate or break ties with people or offend people. But when you mention that the faculty have a right to make statements, and I imagine you're thinking of geopolitical statements and financial statement, anything that could cause kind of a disruption or a break. I'm a full professor with 22 years, making about $90,000 a year, which I'm pleased with, right, in Louisiana, thankfully. I have protection, but we're under the Hatch Act. I can't represent LSU. I represent myself, and I realize it's a very difficult path. So you probably get the gist of what I'm saying. How do, as much as I love that you're supporting our right to state things, but then there's kind of an underlying current that people are looking at post-tenure review, so you're screwed. Like, we know that if we do something terrible, we could be fired as a tenure. Everybody knows that. Like, most people are good, but they honor their tenure, and you know that, and you protect us, which we appreciate. But how do we reconcile those things? Like, we can't stand and make statements as faculty, and not all faculty have protection. So tell me, can you help me to discern what you mean? Because
I'm not.
I know it's
exactly what.
Yeah, it wasn't very.
Just say it. Don't be PC. Just gut it. Just spit it out. Go ahead.
But okay. Yeah, because you don't like nuanced languages, and neither do I.
I like nuance.
You're Chicago, I'm New York.
I think you want to say something directly. I just want you to do it. Go ahead.
I'm Dr. Allen's colleague in social work. Some of us do jobs that put us direct in the fire line of what people don't like. So, for example, I'm on several dissertations that explicitly state critical race theory. I'm on several theses that are about LGBTQ folks and outcomes associated with that. My research takes me into areas with children and youth experiencing homelessness, which directly puts me into contact with LGBTQ youth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I am untenured. What sort of what protections are really there for me to continue on with my line of research and to encourage my students to continue on with my line of research? Because, I just had a defense, or not a defense. I was helping out to get to the defense, and it's all about CRT, which I'm fine with. But I also know, living in Louisiana, that can cause problems because I will be signing off on this student, because they're doing great work. But the risk is much, much higher for me, untenured, in Louisiana. And then it's also really higher for other sorts of pushback. So I think that's, if I interpreted what you were saying, Dr. Allen, I think that's along those lines.
Yeah.
So we have a tenure process, correct? It starts where? Where does the tenure process start? At the department, right? So the department is the first line of defense, if you will, or protection, or peer review, of the work. If your department is functioning well and giving you guidance about your work and saying that your work is of quality, and then you go into the marketplace of other colleagues when you go out for tenure and they respond back that this work is warranting tenure, let's say for that question, then I've not, and Roy hasn't, turned down a single person who might be working in some area that would be perceived as politically problematic by some, okay? Because we're adhering to principles of peer review, and that the department is the unit in which those very important decisions are made. So if you're a well-functioning department, it should provide you that first line of protection. It does not prevent, as we well know, a scholar or a student from being critiqued outside of that unit in some very intense ways. And we've seen that at North Carolina. We've seen it most recently at the University of Texas A&M and other places. I don't plan on getting on a bunch of phone calls with people doing what they did at Texas A&M, okay? And I'm sure it's not gonna do what they did at Chapel Hill. So in some ways, and I hate to say it, it's so idiosyncratic about after a certain level, I said publicly already, if you're engaged in discovery and research, then it's my job fundamentally to the end to protect it. It is. Like I should be willing to not be employed if I'm not willing to protect your right to do. That's where I am with it, because I was a junior faculty member at one point, and I know there were people who were willing to do that for me in my department. And that's the way this really works. And all we really have are each other in this deal. You know, you said one thing I agree with you, broken world, you said. Well, it's a divided world. And so we've just got to protect the research space. You know, that's why I told you I wasn't going to get off into a whole bunch of, if you want to go out and say some things that, you know, might not be related to your research, and, you know, but if it's in that research space, then we've got to protect it. It's not just going to be research on topics like you just described. There are other scientific topics that some people still don't believe. Like, come on. I'm like, it's not like it's a whole plethora of science and social science and even humanistic work that is contested all the time. And we have to protect the right of that contested work to go forward. And I think that's the key to maintaining a great university. You've got to protect it. You've got to be willing to say, I'm not going to work in it if I can't protect it. Well, go ahead and follow up and then you.
Is that right? So, thank you again, President Tate, and I'm sorry to monopolize. You said you prefer bluntness, and I'm going to say that I get so intimidated speaking at these meetings that and especially to you, that I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Rosemary Peters-Hill from the Department of French Studies. Dr. Allen mentioned that we're in a broken world, and I am in a deeply broken department, as I imagine you might know.
No, I don't know.
You don't know, really?
Some things I know.
Okay.
But not day
Well,
to day.
we're still very broken, and
Okay.
we're broken in almost all of the areas that you addressed in your statements earlier. We are especially broken in terms of our handling of power-based violence. And, you know, every year I do a 90-minute training on power-based violence. Sorry. Angrily and with knowledge that my own former chair protected a rapist, a serial rapist, for 3 years. And nothing has happened. She was removed from the chairship. I should say, they were removed from the chairship. And yet they continue to teach. they have been assigned a lot of early morning classes, knowing that fewer students will have to interact with this person. And yet, when they are assigned upper level classes, as is the case for this coming spring, we cannot fill those classes because the students are aware and they are wounded by this history of what happened. There have been no repercussions. None. So I am wondering, and I apologize, I cry when I'm scared and when I'm angry. I'm wondering how we adhere to our own mandatory trainings with an example like this. Why don't we follow our own rules?
Well, with respect, that situation was investigated, and investigations often come up with information and recommendations that are inconsistent with what people around it would want to happen. But in a democratic environment where adjudication is clearly articulated and we follow the processes and the like, unfortunately, obviously this is painful for you, and I'm sure it's painful for many others. What we do is what's recommended from these investigations. And so I can say no more about the matter because even those investigations, other than the recommendations, are not even, I'm not even there. Like, as a president, I'm only given the recommendations from the bodies that, do the work. And so that's all I can say. I have empathy for your community. Simultaneously, I have to adhere to what is recommended to me. Otherwise, I'm just an autocrat, and I can't.
I appreciate that. And I know that, like, when you came here, you inherited a dumpster fire, and I feel for you, and I appreciate the work that you have done here so far very, very much. If I may say bluntly, I think that we should renew our relationship with STAR, because the work of educating people on campus about power-based violence is nowhere near done. It's not even begun, And for example, and then I promise I'll give the microphone away, and I'm going to try to stop crying. So this is not my usual behavior at faculty senate meetings, by the way, just to just make you aware. I taught our humanities and social sciences 1000 class. I had 3 sections of it a fall ago. And I invited a representative from the Title IX office to come and speak with each class and say what their office does, what kinds of things they handle, what students can report, what they can bring there, whether it's, a power-based violence issue or a civil rights issue. And the woman who came to my classes said in each class, I mean, ladies, you got to be a little attentive to what you do. And I about blew steam out of my ears, because that is the whole point. And this is a representative from the Title IX office. We are not doing this the way we should be doing it. We're not doing enough. And so I'm speaking bluntly, but I very strongly urge and plead with you to reinstate the relationship with STAR so that we can get at least a little closer.
So I say this again empathetically, that last request is not going to happen for a lot of reasons, which we're not going into here because they're a contractor, and I'm just not going to do that in this environment. But I will have a conversation with our colleagues in Title IX to ascertain what's actually happening when they go and visit with people and get a better sense of how they're operating in context. I think that's fair. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. I always think gray. I don't know what happened, but I would like to find out very clearly how they're operating when they go into different places. So I appreciate your information. Other? Yes.
Yeah, Kerry Dooley, College of Engineering.
Mhm.
The issue of irrevocability of choice of pension plan has arisen itself again. This has been going on for over 20 years. I've been on the faculty senate 3 different times, spaced by several years, and each time I've been on, this issue has come up. Okay, so basically what the resolution proposed to the Senate is that everybody get another bite at the apple to change their supposedly irrevocable decision and move from one pension plan to another. And to ask the administration and the state to back this. So my question is, I know you don't like to give statements, but does the upper administration have any perspective on this at all? And if this resolution passed, would the upper administration put its legislative team to back the possibility of another one-time irrevocable election of pension plan? Well, no, I'm not trying to say that because I'm not trying to say it because I polled my own unit on this and it is almost equal for and against the pension, the resolution.
Do you want to mention this? I mean, it's not an area in which I spend a whole lot of my public policy contemplation.
So I think there is a resolution that I think is going to be talked about later in this meeting. I think what you're asking is, would the president and others support this? Roy Heidelberg and I met recently with John Walters and Lewis in that office. I do think that it's something that, you know, and of course, President Tate has to speak to his own beliefs about this, but I do think the resolution as it is proposed now is possibly doable. The resolutions and the past that have been presented before and what the legislature wants to see happen have not been doable, and that is that you would have a revocable option to go back and establish time in the prior system. That's probably never going to pass. The leaders of the retirement system who I've met with before will fight those behind the cloak of darkness with legislatures. They may propose them, but they'll never pass. But I think the resolution that Roy's team has put together that we've worked with there with the subcommittee here has a chance to pass. I don't want to speak for President Tate, but it's doable. And the head of the teachers retirement system in a meeting I had with VP Kimberly Lewis about a year ago said that that was the only way they would probably ever support that type resolution. And that is a one-time, just start from scratch this day forward, not any back time to switch systems. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, thanks for answering.
Okay. Well, I think that's it for me. I'm glad we got a few questions answered, and I appreciate you chiming in on that one because that was below the radar screen for me. I thank you for your time. I wish you the very best as you end the semester up, and I hope you have a great next semester.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Speaking of retirement and resolutions, our next item of business is new business, and it's Resolution 2305 to pursue legislative changes that remove the irrevocability of optional retirement plan enrollment, sponsored by the Faculty Senate Benefits Committee. And we have Roy Heidelberg here, who will just contextualize it and will then read the resolution. Thank you so much, Roy, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Carrie, for already introducing it. Appreciate that. So as many of you know, last spring, the Benefits Committee put together a resolution 2301. It was to expand options for retirement. It passed this body, and since then we have been involved in some discussions about how to turn that resolution into some kind of action. And the resolution that you see here is somewhat the culmination of those efforts. In large part, it has to do with the feasibility of achieving what is the primary objective, which is basically to create a fairer and more balanced retirement option system for faculty and staff. And then also, of course, it is to ensure that, as Clay artfully described it, in the back rooms and in the behind cloaked rooms, this does not get quashed without any type of involvement or hearing. As some of you who follow this type of work know, legislation has been proposed in the past at the state level to try to address some of the aspects or the imbalances that we'll talk about here with the optional retirement plan, and it rarely gets out of committee. And I think we now understand why, and we have a better way of addressing some of those concerns that have been raised by some of the stakeholders and interests, primarily Teachers Retirement System of Louisiana. So that's just a little background. I'm going to now read the resolution, and then I'll take some questions. This is Resolution 2305 to pursue legislative changes that remove the irrevocability of optional retirement plan enrollment, sponsored by the Faculty Senate Benefits Committee, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the committee. Whereas the optional retirement plan ORP was established July 1, 1990 as an alternative to the defined benefit plan under the Teachers Retirement System of Louisiana, TRSL, in order to provide maximum portability of retirement savings. And whereas, according to Louisiana Administrative Code 58, Section 1507G, any person electing to participate in the ORP shall always be ineligible for membership in the regular retirement plan of the TRSL, even if he is employed in a position covered by the TRSL as prescribed by RS 11928. And whereas Louisiana Revised Statute 11925 states that academic and administrative employees of public institutions of higher education may make an irrevocable election to participate in the optional retirement plan, and states in other parts that the decision to enroll in ORP is irrevocable. And whereas state employees in Louisiana are excluded from participating in Social Security because the state of Louisiana did not opt into the Section 218 agreement with the Social Security Administration. And whereas employees who enroll in ORP are members of TRSL and receive a TRSL retirement benefit and are thus subject to federal regulations under the windfall elimination provision, which reduces earned Social Security benefits. And whereas employees who enroll in ORP do so with limited information of their career opportunities at Louisiana higher education institutions. And whereas employees who enroll in ORP but who seek a secure retirement benefit through a pension are compelled to seek employment outside of Louisiana or in the private sector. And whereas elimination of the irrevocability clause in Louisiana 11925 and the concomitant clause in Louisiana Administrative Code 58, Section 1507G will help to retain highly qualified employees in the state of Louisiana. Therefore, be it resolved that the LSU Faculty Senate and the LSU Staff Senate jointly call on the Louisiana Legislature to eliminate the irrevocability clause from LARS 11925 and permit employees with a one-time opportunity to enroll in the defined benefit plan after enrolling in the ORP, and resolve that the LSU Faculty Senate and the LSU Staff Senate jointly call on LSU leadership to work with Faculty Senate and Staff Senate leadership to pursue such changes in legislation in a timely manner, and resolve that the Senate leadership encourage their peer leaders at other higher education institutions and campuses to join them in pursuing this legislative change. Any questions? So I would like to state one point here, that this is a joint resolution with Staff Senate. We have been working closely with Staff Senate on the language here. And the point of this is that it is not just a faculty concern, and that it will not be presented as exclusively a faculty concern when it is brought to the legislature. This is an important part of it. This is a talent retention attempt. It is not simply about tenure. It is not simply about faculty, but it is about all employees here at LSU, within the LSU system, and at all other higher education institutions throughout the state. TRSL serves not just the higher education institutions throughout the state, but also K-12. And so we are in conversation with K-12 leaders as well about this. Yes.
I'm Mike Russo from the library. This whole retirement system completely baffles me. once, if this happens and someone from optional moves into TRSL, is that decision irrevocable?
It would likely be a one-time thing. You can't go back and forth between. If you, now this would be the details of the legislation, which we would have to work out with TRSL. But at any point, you can leave the defined benefits plan, but you give up all the contributions made on behalf of you by your employer. So at any point right now, somebody could leave their defined benefits plan and go into ORP, but they would lose all the contributions made by their employer. You would not, though, be able to join the defined benefits plan, leave it, and then come back to it.
Okay.
And that's the point. And the other detail I think that's important there is the way that this would be structured is you would essentially be starting as a new enrollee in the defined benefits plan, and you would retain your entire ORP savings that you had accrued over however long you had accrued it. So if you've been contributing to the ORP and the university has been contributing as well to ORP for 10 years, and then you decide, okay, I'm committed to Louisiana, I'm committed to LSU, I'd like to join the defined benefits plan, you would start and you would start in year one, essentially, or year zero in the defined benefits plan.
Okay, and this resolution contains some information that I was completely unaware of, that the employees enrolled in ORP are members of TRSL.
Indeed.
That's the current situation.
That is.
Okay, because I always thought they were different.
No, ORP is an optional retirement plan administered by TRSL. You are considered a member of TRSL when enrolled in ORP, okay. And it is one of the reasons why those who came with any type of Social Security benefits could lose substantial amounts of that through the windfall elimination exclusion provision.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, why was the optional retirement plan irrevocable to begin with?
Why was it irrevocable? Why was it made irrevocable in the original? I'm sorry. Did you want me to scroll that up?
If you
scroll back up, right there. Right. I would imagine that it was an actuarial decision, but I don't know for sure. So that people can't go back and forth.
Well, thank you.
Sure. I had a question over here.
Yeah. Would this opening this up to having a one-time change, does that open up any fiduciary responsibility to the university or to any other department within? I'm just thinking of some of the lawsuits that have been brought out against like Duke, who used old mortality tables or anything like that. Like, I'm just wondering if if this opens up any fiduciary responsibility, or if there's any planning to open up any sort of fiduciary responsibility regarding someone deciding to or not to make that switch.
The way that this would be designed is that you would essentially be joining as a new enrollee. And so you would be starting at year zero. So there would be no actuarial backlog. So there would be no need to calculate the actuarial responsibility of your enrollment. So you wouldn't get 10 years of credit if you joined after 10 years of
right.
And so it would the responsibility.
Could someone, so like take me for example, we'll just use me as an example. So let's say I am in the ORP, right? And I get to a point and I'm like, you know what? I want to make LSU my permanent home. I'm going to live in Baton Rouge forever and ever and ever and deal with the weather.
I'm sorry, and what?
Deal with the weather.
Oh,
my attempt at levity. And I decide I get to 40 years from now, right? And I'm like, oh my God, it would have been much, much better if I was in TSRL and I had the opportunity 40 years ago to make a change, but I didn't make a change. The university never told me I was better off doing TSRL. Does that open us up to any issues like with that?
There's right now a lawsuit against the university, but this is independent of that lawsuit, and it involves the underfunding of ORP members under TRSL. That is a remedy lawsuit. This particular piece of legislation is explicitly not intended to remedy harm, but is instead an attempt to fix the structural problems within ORP so that those harms are at least mitigated in the future.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks. I think I understand, but can you clarify what is the difference in this plan that makes it unlikely to be quashed in the cloakroom?
Yes. The previous pieces of legislation attempted to mandate by law that individuals who did switch from ORP into the defined benefits plan would be given actuarial credit for their years. And that creates massive complications, as you can imagine. And that's essentially why TRSL would eliminate it. It would be too costly. This particular piece of legislation, as we would propose it, would not mandate that. We are still working out the details of it, but there would be no mandate that you would receive previously accrued credit. Now, in terms of buybacks and stuff, that's something that is a TRSL policy, and that already exists for TRSL. Once you enroll as a defined benefit member, you can then work that out on an individual basis. The nice thing about the way that we've designed this piece of legislation is that it would not require a fiscal note. And for any of you who work along the legislative process here in Louisiana, a fiscal note can create a lot of problems for any piece of legislation. This one would not, because it would not create any obligations from the state.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any question over there?
So is this a one point in time or one per person? So if I'm hired in the future, someone in the future hypothetically starts on, ORP, and they then realize they made a mistake, is this subject? Can they then use this to get out of it one time?
Yes,
it is. So one per person, not
yes, one per
time.
person, one per
okay, I got a
individual.
jail-free
It
card.
would
Thanks.
be, the idea here is that like I was just talking about with the lawsuit, there have been harms created in the past. We're not trying to address those harms that were created in the past, but we want to make sure that we mitigate those harms in the future. So this would give every individual who perhaps came here as an assistant professor, didn't know how long they'd be at LSU, didn't know if they would achieve tenure, and then they do achieve tenure and they say, yes, I want to commit my career here to LSU, but I enrolled in ORP and it's not advantageous for me to be there. They don't have to leave LSU to get a pension plan. They don't have to go into the private sector, where they don't have pension plans really over there, but they don't have to go into the private sector. They can stay right here in Louisiana and enroll in the defined benefits plan.
Right, but this applies to people who have yet to be hired.
Yes,
as well.
it would change the law, which the law right now in the two places that I mentions irrevocability. The simple way is to remove that irrevocability clause or that irrevocability statement and change it to a one-time option. Any other questions? Okay. Is that it for me then?
Okay. So our resolutions, according to our constitution, they're read twice. But if we're so moved, someone can make a motion to suspend the rules and vote on it now. But then it will take 2/3 of a vote to make this happen. Okay, so all those in favor to suspend the rules, please say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions? Yeah. Okay, so the motion passes. We've suspended the rules to vote on the resolution 2305. And now we move to vote unless there's any further discussion. Okay, so all those in favor for the resolution 2305, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the resolution passes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our new business. So we have two presentations remaining. So I invite Jackie Bach, Singh, and Craig Woolley to present on faculty survey on educational technology.
Are you sure? Okay.
Maybe you can edit, we can share.
Okay, so I would first like to thank Vice Provost Jackie Bach and Chief Information Officer Craig Woolley for great support for this idea, which actually originated here from our friend Jim Madden, a Senate meeting ago. And Jim approached me asking like whether we should be having a survey on Moodle and other software technologies which we have been using. So I discussed this idea very informally with Craig, and immediately like Jackie and Craig were so enthusiastic, we formed a team. We have been working on email, and today is the first day like when we are presenting the seed of the idea. This is not, the survey is is still to be formed. We are going to work hard on it for next 2-3 months, but we just want to present you like what we have in mind, and we need all the feedback, criticism, and support from you. This is going to be a faculty-driven survey, and it's going to be, our idea was that it should go through IT Governance Council, but since all three of us are also on the IT Governance Council, it turns out like it will be a trilateral effort shared by Office of Academic Affairs, ITS, and Faculty Senate. There will be financial cost to this because we want the survey to be done pretty well and to have the as large participation as possible. And we have roughly agreed that we will share the cost. So with this, like I give this to Craig.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It is important that this is going to be a collaboration. We have done something like this before 2 years ago, where again, the 3 areas did a faculty survey of classroom technology, and the results of that did produce upgrades in 60 classrooms. And I want to be clear on, not just the registrar scheduled classrooms. A lot of these classrooms were department and college owned that we were able to upgrade with dollars that we found because the results of the survey were so overwhelming from faculty that said we need hybrid capabilities in all of our classrooms. So we were able to get that done. So we are hoping we can build on that success and deliver a survey that comes from the faculty. I think it's important to all three of us that this is a faculty-driven survey. I'm here to support it. I'm here to help any way I can, but we do want faculty creating the questions, or at least being a big part of the creation of the questions of the survey, so that we can make sure we're measuring and getting results and the things that you're wanting to get answers to. This second survey we're talking about would be educational technology. So it wouldn't be limited to classroom technology like the first one was. This would be a broader one. We have already been this morning to the Faculty IT Committee. Dr. Singh and I presented this idea kind of informally there at that group. And then the three of us presented at the IT Governance Committee this afternoon also and went over this presentation. So we're making the rounds and trying to get input, and then I'll pass it on so that we can talk more about what we're going to do.
Thanks, Craig. All right, just a little bit about the guidelines that we're using to sort of collaborate together. So we are, as Craig pointed out, going to create the survey with input from various constituents. So you can look forward to getting a call for questions. One of the things that we really would like to do is increase the participation on this survey. And Param will explain to you some of the ideas that we have on how we're going to increase, we hope, participation. And then our hope is to submit the results to various stakeholders to support them in their decision-making process. And as Craig pointed out, in the past, we have been successful at doing some upgrades based on the feedback that we received from faculty. So, you know, where we are right now, we are really in the planning stages. So this is very early on. As you just heard, you know, you guys are getting like groundbreaking news. Today is sort of, I guess, what do they call it when you? Yes, breaking news. Thank you. So we are at the point where we're just like determining these parameters. You know, what areas are we going to cover? We know that we need to cover both hardware and software, but how far do we want to go in those questions? We are collecting incentives to increase participation. I think Param's going to talk about that. And then we are in the point of sort of drafting what questions we might use on the survey.
So this is the rough timeline. So once we get the feedback from you today, and we had some feedback from ITGC earlier today and also from the FSIT committee, 3 of us are going to work together with the Education Technology Subcommittee of ITGC and also with the FSIT committee, and which gave a very valuable feedback again in the morning. Our idea will be to draft some sort of a survey using what have been used as surveys earlier, refining them, refining the questions, asking the right questions which faculty would like to pose. For example, not only about the software, but how the new IT policies or revised IT policies bring the need for hardware to be supplied centrally or not for better compliance. This is something which ITS and the Faculty Senate IT Committee both realize is very important for better compliance. Once we have this plan, we will come back to you. We will discuss where we are, and we will discuss with ITGC, getting the final inputs from the Faculty Senate and ITGC. Then we will launch the survey, hopefully in early February. We'll compile the results in early March, and then again, we'll present the results in the March meeting of the Faculty Senate, and hopefully at some point to ITGC in summer. And the idea is that we should have the recommendations available to the stakeholders, Office of Academic Affairs, LSU administration, of what are the faculty needs on education technology, both software side and hardware side before the semester ends, so that we can try to implement them, if possible, at least some of them in the fall semester. So regarding the incentives, I thought like Jackie, you were supposed to talk about it.
Sorry.
But so the idea is that I think in the one of the last surveys which was done, we had about 280 faculty responding, but we are about 1,500 strong. So I would personally like that number to go up to 600 or 700. So I give an idea that probably we should give everything, or we should give something to everyone who participates. Maybe like if it's a LSU branded umbrella or LSU branded backpack or something. So Office of Academic Affairs has generously come forward with 200 items. ITS is going to have like 3 big items, including a Dell laptop costing about $1,500, probably a curved monitor and a noise canceling headphones. Those will be owned by the departments. The faculty, if you win it, your chair will own it, or the department will own it, and then it will come to you or maybe to someone else the chair likes. But anyway, so and rest of the things, because our target is to go to 600 or 700 or higher, whatever is the remaining thing which is substantial. I discussed this with FSEC, and FSEC, without knowing what the number is, has generously agreed for that fluid budget, which is again going to be substantial. So I think like 3 of the units are going to split the cost, something about $2,000 each, something like that. And the hope is that with these incentives, probably we can get a much higher response rate. So, but again, like if someone has other ideas on how we can incentivize better, or how we can get more feedback, everything is welcome right now. This is all in a very preliminary planning stage, but we have worked out numbers, and we have the support of all 3 units for these numbers.
Just to be clear, it's 1 laptop, not a laptop for everybody who takes the survey. We committed to the 1, just in case there's confusion.
Yeah, you heard that microphone?
Yes.
Yeah, my biggest concern would be participation. So the people, I mean, in any survey, those who respond are not a representative sample of the population. Now, it makes sense. Depending on how the survey is advertised, you're going to have different participation. So let's suppose it's advertised using technology. Then obviously you're not going to get a response from people that are hesitant to use technology. But those may be some of the people that you want to understand, because maybe your objective is to increase the use of technology among those who are presently hesitant. If you have a participation rate of 600, then certainly you have you're finding out information from a lot of people that are interested in the services and the opportunities. It might make sense, though, to find out, to maybe take a random sample of those who did not respond and pursue them. All right. That is, be sure you get something from each of those members of the random sample. All right. And so this is something, I mean, the sampling bias is something that you need to think about carefully. And this is not to say that a biased survey is useless, but it is to say that sampling bias means that there are certain things that you're going to miss, and we should be aware of those.
That's a great point, and I think we can discuss it in our subcommittees and come up with a strategy for that, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you all for this very interesting initiative. I think the part that we kind of miss in a lot of these technology-driven talks is like people that agreeing to that thing is those who are the most enthusiastic about technology are the ones that are going to doing it. And most people, like when you start looking at your population distribution, are not. That's why we have, early adopters, laggards, and things like that. Main thing with this technology part, I kind of want to see your view on is how does it impact the stakeholders in terms of learning? As a faculty, we can go, like latest thing that comes out of it, I'm like the first one in the line, like I want to do it. But when you look at it from the student's perspective, both undergraduate and graduate, how does this thing flip back or use that as an opportunity? If these students are coming through and they get their learning experiences through this latest technology, it provides them opportunities in the future. So it is for really building the stakeholders. I think that might be a way to sort of engage a lot of faculty that are not there. Is you are in this business for teaching and undergraduate and graduate students, and by using these kinds of technologies, you improve their future chances, careers, things like that would be a better way to umbrella and all. Yeah, I understand it's a good incentive to get into the survey, but redirect it back towards how it impacts learning for the students and how does that make them very effective and the next generation teacher kind of a deal. Does that make any sense? Sure. Okay.
Like, thank you so much. Like, I think this is the kind of input which we need. And I think like we can design questions which actually reflect that. And the goal of the survey is not just the personal technology needs, but essentially in the university business, like how it will impact the education and research.
I just want to thank you again for starting something like this. I actually think, based on talking to my colleagues, that this is something that we want. I don't see that participation won't be at a high rate, especially if you're asking questions about Moodle and technology within classrooms that maybe are in buildings that are overlooked. What I would suggest, and I know it just requires extra time, which is always hard to manage, but I think sending it out in an email that goes with a lot of other LSU sponsored emails that come to us is going to sit with all the other sponsored LSU emails. And so I think if it's possible to attend different division or area unit meetings and having that face-to-face conversation will go much farther than that email that we get with all the other emails. And I think that faculty are going to want to fill this out. And I think it's just a direct line of communication, I think, always goes a little bit farther than an indirect email.
Thank you. Again, that's a great suggestion. Appreciate it.
And I think like maybe we can
split this work, and probably I really appreciate this idea. I think like we can go to the department faculty meetings and make a 5-minute presentation. But again, like coming back, though the idea started from Moodle, and I think like maybe we should mention that we are the only university in SEC which still uses Moodle. 9 out of 16 have moved to Canvas, and Jackie informed me in the morning that we are the only university in the state which is still with Moodle. I don't think like the high schools use it or yes. But again, there are pros and cons. Like in the meeting in the morning on the FSIT, like maybe Ken Lopata, who is an expert on open source softwares, he can mention like, I personally, we don't have any stand which way or another, but we want this feedback to come in. We want to see like whether 80% or 70% of faculty members want to switch from Moodle to Canvas or something else, then we can try to address those needs.
So I'm thinking about incentive possibilities. I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
I was about to say, okay, thanks.
Well, not yet.
All right.
So I know for my department, we're very top heavy with a generation that's all going to retire in the next like year and a half, leaving a bunch of associate professors and 1 assistant. And that younger, less salaried group is we're comfortable with technology. But I think for us, at least, and I speak from a very small world, right? But in our world, having something like this promoted by the chair would go a long way toward guaranteeing participation, especially if there were some kind of reward for the department as a group, like, I don't know, dinner out at
I was going to say a
Steakplace or
pizza
something.
party.
Pizza party? I don't think the French department would care too much about pizza, but some kind of thing. These people eat brie all day long. So anyway, no, just something that would reward the department as a whole, as well as anything individual. Because the last time I did a survey, I spent 25 minutes answering questions and got to enter my name in for a $10 Amazon gift card that I didn't win. So not feeling super motivated. Anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Have y'all thought about doing any focus groups? Because I'd like to participate in a more nuanced discussion of it.
So I was thinking one of the questions on the survey we commonly see is, are you interested in participating in a follow-up focus group or interview? So I think, as we plan, that's something that, I'm going to ask the committee to consider. Yeah, it's a good point.
Thanks again. I think just kind of following up on that, that's an excellent suggestion. If you want to increase the participation, it sort of is like you get yourself like a champion or a volunteer in the units that you want to get the feedback from. And best way to do it is to actually reach out at the level of a unit head rather than, mass emails, like a lot of people have sort of suggested that. But I think within our faculty senate, you have got the messengers here. If you wanted a lot of feedback from all the faculty, I think the best way would be to propagate in each college, go to their each unit. It's just get 1 volunteer from the department. So you still are not doing the number game yet, but once you have somebody championing for your message, I think each unit will start reciprocating. I think that's how you want to recruit it, is as have at least 1/3 or 1/2 of the faculty following that, okay, we need to change this thing somewhere, right?
So the idea of us having these mega prizes was essentially to attract the chairs so that the chairs knows that the department gets it. But I think the Senator Tyagi can be the ambassador for College of Engineering. We can start from you. Scott?
So I'm not super serious about this, but consider calling it the Moodle or Canvas survey. And then ask all your other questions. And the very last question should be, do you want to keep Moodle? And You will get everybody everybody here has a feeling about Moodle or versus Canvas, which, you know, if you have children, you see everything's in Canvas, but if just by the title, you might get way more participation than you'd expect.
Okay. Well,
Thank you very much.
for your time. Thank you so much. Last but certainly not least, Niki Norton will speak about the parental leave policy. And we're very grateful. Thank you so much for your patience at our meeting. And
can you hear me okay? All right, hopefully this will be short and sweet because I know it's been a long meeting. But as Anessa said earlier, we have adopted the executive order on parental leave and the civil service changes. Those changes have been put into PS 12 and PM 20. We are awaiting presidential signature on those. So I'm hoping that that'll be done in the next couple of weeks and then that would be published. However, what this does is essentially allows anybody who is having a birth of a child, an adoption, or a fostering of a child under 18 to, as of January 1, have up to 6 weeks of paid leave that does not deduct from their annual or their sick leave. That I feel like this is a huge win for the state. It's a huge win for LSU. The other thing that is written into policy that you may not be familiar with is changes on crisis leave. So this actually happened before parental leave came into effect, but parental leave is going to offer 6 weeks of paid leave, and crisis leave has also been changed to automatically give up to 6 weeks of crisis leave or for the adoption and for the birth of a child. So you could essentially get up to 12 weeks of paid leave that you may or may not have had before. So if you do not have sick leave accrued or you do not have annual leave, you could potentially get crisis leave if you're having a birth or an adoption of a child and the 6 weeks of parental leave. So you would have up to 12 weeks. There's really not a whole lot more to say other than that we are expecting this to be published very soon in PS 12 and PM 20. It is going to be for everybody who is leave earning. So if you are more than 50% effort, you are going to be eligible for parental leave. And it is for the adoption, the birth, and a fostering of a child. So I know that it's very short and sweet. There's not a whole lot to it other than I just feel like it's a huge win for us. So any questions? Yes.
Yeah, real quick, so should the next administration?
Obviously, I can't speak to the unknown. I would hope that it would continue because, like I said, I do think it is a win for recruitment and retention for Louisiana and for LSU. However, we don't know what pressures there may be on that. One of the things, the executive order was for our unclassified and faculty, whereas civil service governs the classified, and they were actually the ones who began this. So it would require, if gubernatorial pressure is applied, it would have to be reversing not only the executive order, but having the Civil Service Commission come in and reverse on civil service as well. Not saying that that couldn't happen, but it's two different bodies. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right. Thank you
so much for your time and your work on this. This concludes our meeting. Please join us for reception outside. And our next meeting will be on January 24th, 2024. Yeah. And Everybody's whispering in my. Is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Okay.